Hey, thank you so much for joining us with another DREI podcast for the Real Estate Educators Association. I'm John Mayfield, and I'm so excited to have Kim Stotesbury with us today. Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, John, for asking me. It's a privilege, sir.
Yeah, well, I've always appreciated and learned so much whenever you have done presentations for the DREI or for REEA. I remember one presentation you did in Kansas City a couple of years ago, and I thought that was the best presentation. And you kind of had a challenging room setup there for that presentation. But want to just visit each month, first of all, for our listeners and viewers. If you're not familiar with what the DREI designation stands for, well, it's the Distinguished Real Estate Instructor, uh, is the title of that. And I have to tell you, it's been so huge for me as an instructor. So many times as instructors, we think that we have it all together and we're great instructors. And we probably, I know those of you watching, you are great instructors, but there's something about the DREI that just takes you to a whole different level and makes you step back and look at your presentation skills. And so that's the goal of these broadcasts, is to help our candidates find out what they can do to be better at their profession. Those of us who have the DREI remind us on skills we need to sharpen. And if you're just watching and you're thinking, I'd like to find out more about the Real Estate Educators Association or the DREI, well, we hope this will do that for you. And so I want to just back up for Kim. I was talking about a great presentation that you did in Kansas City and watching you do presentations. But let's just back up. What got you interested in teaching, and how did you gravitate toward the real estate instructional part? Were you already in real estate, or just bring us up to speed on a little bit about you and how you started teaching?
Well, thank you for asking that, John Mayfield. I That takes me way back, sir. It's been a long time. I never really had any intention or desire or any thought that I might be good at it or even interested in teaching really anything until I became a real estate broker, and I happened to be in a board of directors meeting for our local association of realtors. And they had an opening at the community college needing an instructor. And my children were in middle school. I'd probably been in real estate 5, 6 years at this point. And folks looked around the table and said, well, who has time for that? And I thought, well, I might have time for that. And what does it involve? And so I met with the director of education at the local community college, and he encouraged me, and I applied, and fortunately I was approved, and he gave me a classroom and a group of students. And the first thing I thought was, well, I don't want to be boring. When I took my first real estate class, my instructor actually read the book to us,
Mm-hmm.
and it was difficult to sit through because I studied really hard outside of class. So I was determined not to be boring. And then I went to the community college, bought me a ticket to a local real estate educators conference. The North Carolina Real Estate Educators Association had us a fall conference every year. So they sent me to the fall conference, and I had the privilege to witness Mark Barker on the platform.
Is that right?
Yes. And this would have been 1992, I believe. And I just remember sitting in my seat and watching him lead a group of us through something. I don't even remember what the topic was. And he took my breath away. I thought, wow, I really want to strive to do that in the classroom. And so that started me on my journey to pursue my DREI. And it took me 2 years to obtain my DREI. And I had to submit 2 videos. My first one, John Hamilton declined. So I feel the pain
Yeah.
of, not being successful with the first attempt. I don't consider it a failure by any means because I learned so much from that first attempt. And I've just
You
been
do.
teaching ever since. I love it. I actually gave up my real estate career doing property management in 1998 to teach full time. So don't y'all count those years because, yeah, that might mean I'm old, but
Yeah.
I've been doing this for over 30 years and I'm very
Yeah.
blessed. And it is my full time career, education.
I knew that, and so thank you for that story. And you were probably like me. When I first started, the first time I was to teach a course, and I started teaching because I had a brokerage and I wanted to recruit agents, and agents would have to drive to St. Louis, and we're about an hour from St. Louis. So I thought, why don't I just start my own pre-licensed real estate school? But did you feel like I did back then, that if you really want to know a subject matter, prepare to teach a group of people? And like you, I didn't want to be boring, but it just opened my eyes to all of the things that I had learned in pre-license school that I'd forgotten, but were so really valuable nuggets that you could use every day in your business. And I love the story about Mark because I've known Mark since has a school in Missouri and I've been going to Missouri Real Estate Commission meetings since I think 88. And just to have the privilege to see Mark talk or ask a question because he has such a wealth of knowledge. And so that's very, very, very fascinating. Thank you. So let's talk about the video process because you are actually head of that um, group now for the DREIs, the whole video review process. It is scary. I was turned down my first time as well, but I learned so much when I watched the video back and when I had Carol Murray walk me through some of the things. And gosh, it that helped me so much. I'm glad I got turned down the first time because now I consciously think about those all the time in the classroom. But talk to us a little bit about the video process. What are some things that you kind of maybe notice or you would encourage people to be conscious of when they're getting ready to submit their video?
Thank you for that question, John. What do I, as chair of the video review committee, think is really important, if not the most important thing for a candidate to consider as they prepare for their video? And I don't know if I can nail it down to one, but I'll try to give you two. Number one, don't spend any money on a professional videographer. You are wasting your money. You get absolutely no extra points for a beautiful video that fades in and out, or for even the quality of the video. As long as we can see you most of the time, and you can wander around the room and be off camera briefly, that's not a problem. As long as we can tell you're in a live classroom with students, show the top of a couple of heads or the back of a head, that's fine. It can literally be your cell phone in the corner of the room or a video camera. So first, don't spend any money on a fancy video. And probably the most important thing, I think, is make sure you watch the video. Once you've made a video that you're thinking about submitting, the very next step needs to be you watch it. And watch it thinking about all the things you cover in your mentor program. Room setup, question handling. Did you call the students by name? Did you affirm the student for asking the question? Did you repeat the question and include the entire class? Or did you just have a one-on-one conversation potentially with a nameless participant in the class? Those are some things that really, when someone does a video and they don't pay attention to those details, their ability to be successful when they submit the video is almost zero. It really is. So, watch the video and think about all the things you learned in the mentor session and apply them. And I'll go another step further, if I may, John.
Sure.
When you open this session, you made a comment that we're all really good instructors or even great instructors, and I would say we're all probably great speakers. If
Right.
we weren't great speakers, if we weren't interested in speaking to people, we wouldn't be standing at the front of the room trying to teach. And the DREI is not a speaker designation. And you can be
No.
a really great speaker, a good keynote speaker, and not be a distinguished real estate instructor. There's a little different skill set. So just because your video isn't successful the first time doesn't mean you're not a great speaker. You could even be an
Right.
exceptional speaker. Are you focusing on your students in a way that helps them be successful? Are you
Well,
connecting with them?
yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because when I made that statement earlier, and I guess I always hate to talk too much because I'm interviewing you and I want you to speak, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But in my own mind, I had been teaching for a while, and as I mentioned, I've known Mark Barker. I knew Mark was very deeply involved with REEA. I had joined REEA years ago, went to a conference when it was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was just so mesmerized because I saw these people, as a new back then anyway, as an instructor, we were always getting complimentary copies of books to preview from these publishers. And I would see this Charles Jacoby's, and different people, and they were all there at REEA. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. And then I got away from REEA, but I always had this mindset, Kim, that, oh, I knew about DREI and I knew Mark authored it. But I just thought I don't have time for that, or I don't need that. But yet, when I decided to invest in the DREI program and go through that, I was like, why didn't I do this years ago? Because it just took me to a different level. It polished things that I didn't realize that I was doing in the classroom, like not repeating the question. I've always been pretty good at repeating the question, but just those little subtle things you could do. And when I submitted my first video, and Carol's like, well, let's watch this, or go at this number and watch that. And I was like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that I did that to the whole during. And so, like you said, it's doesn't mean you're not at a pretty high level. It just means the distinguished real estate instructor takes you to some places that you really maybe never have thought about when you get into all of the different principles. So I want to get back to you and talking about those GAPE principles. Was there anything going back when you first went through it that was a real eye opener for you? Or I know bridging we talk about is kind of a challenging thing, but any specific topic that we cover in the course that today is just kind of a game changer for you, or allows you to shine in the classroom?
Well, I would have to say the one thing I continue to work on is bridging.
Yes.
And I try to do it in my everyday conversations with people and just my life in general. I find if I bridge in a conversation that I'm having with my husband from one topic to the next, it's a habit,
Right.
but that is a skill that, I'll be honest with you, a lot of successful DREIs never managed to effectively bridge consistently all the time. That is a skill that you really have to work on. The one area that I think causes the most grief, and I shared it earlier, room setup. If you don't set the room up well, you've got too many empty seats, or you can't you can't move among the students. You know, you've got that classroom style with you at the front and you can't reach the back row. That's an obstacle that's very difficult to overcome, and it impacts how the students relate to each other as
Right.
much as how the instructor relates to the students. So room setup is really critical, and then handling those questions. If you don't effectively follow that process to effectively handle the questions, it's really going to be difficult for you. If I look back at my own personal experience, I'm going to go way back, John Mayfield, and I had no idea, sir, but my second REEA conference was in Louisville, Kentucky, and
Oh,
I
it
took
was.
my
Okay.
DREI exam in Louisville, Kentucky. So I was there with
Okay.
you, and George Bell was president of REEA at that time. I don't know if you remember George Bell, and I believe
That
Mark
name sounds
Barker was
familiar.
going out as president
Right.
that year. That was an exciting conference and a fabulous location for us to have
Yes.
a REEA conference. So I took my exam in Louisville, Kentucky, and then I began my journey to get my video ready because I'd already done the application. That's another important task. You know, it took a little time to gather everything I needed to fill out my application. The one thing that I think I learned going through that process, because I had a mentor named Gary Taylor, and some of you watching this podcast may remember Gary Taylor, very well known educator, ed director from the Charlotte region of North Carolina. And Gary Taylor is, to this day, in my opinion, one of the reasons North Carolina has more DREIs than any other state. We have for as long as I've been affiliated with REEA, and to this day, I do believe we have the largest number of DREIs coming out of North Carolina. And Gary actually recorded me. So Gary would record me, come to my class, drive an hour to record me, and shake his head and say, "No, that one's not going to work." And he'd come back another day and do it again. And he finally said, "This is the one." And I would go home and watch them. You know, he would say, "Go watch it. That, you know, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this." And when I finally hit the one and Gary blessed it, this was my second submission, and Gary said, "Send it. You should send that one." What I did was I ran out of time. I had an outline. I had transparencies way back then, John Mayfield. Do you
Right.
remember the
Yeah.
plastic
I use those
transparencies?
too.
So I was doing fair housing, and we were about 40 minutes into the 50-minute session, and I was done. I mean, I was done. Well, you got to have 50 minutes.
Right.
So I had to basically just start interacting with the students and carrying on a conversation with the students. And it took me to the next level. So if I had to encourage, and I think the reviewers today are more emphatic that needs to be the style from beginning to end. We are not watching the video to judge your ability to speak for 50 minutes. We are assessing your ability to interact and engage your students for a full 50 minutes. And frankly, they need to talk at least 20-25% of the time. And if it's a continuing ed class, I would say 50% of the time. In a
Right.
pre-licensed class, the instructor has to keep more control and lead it a little more firmly in the right direction. But you've got to have a conversation with your students and not just lecture from the front of the room.
I love that. Thank you. Great advice there. And I'm going to try to bridge here now to when you develop a course to present to a live classroom, say a presentation you're working on. Do you, when you look at the outline, do you try to factor in, okay, I want to lecture for this 6 minutes or 5 minutes, and then this would be a good place to ask some questions? I guess I'd love for you to walk us through developing a course or a presentation, what's your process you go through that you could give some advice for those listening? I don't know if that was a good bridge or not, but I was
I think
trying
it
to
was
bridge.
I think
I
it
was
was
trying to
fabulous,
bridge
John
from,
Mayfield. I think it
I was,
was fabulous
okay.
to go from getting ready to do the video to actually preparing mentally
Yeah,
for the presentation. Take the content that you're going to share. My opinion, I believe it's important to get the students speaking to you in the first 60 seconds, maybe the first 2 minutes.
right.
If you speak for more than 2 or 3 minutes, the students are going to sit back and they are going to let you lead that. A lot of instructors say, well, they wouldn't talk to me. Well, make them talk to you. Come up with a way to make them talk to you. A couple of them will talk to you if you give them an opportunity and do it sooner rather than later. Once I get them speaking, and this includes Zoom. It might be an in-person class or it could be a Zoom class. I think it's even more important on Zoom or
Right.
online to get them talking to each other and to you. You can do a meet and greet. Everybody turn to your neighbor and say, hey, I'm glad I'm here. Why are you here? That's one way to do it. And then I would say at least every 5 minutes or so, if not more often, cover a point and ask a question. Ask a question so that the students maybe can lead you to the next point and let them be an active participant in the learning. And I would think if you've spoken more than 10 minutes without any interaction with the student, then
That's,
that's a
yeah.
lecture. That's a lecture. That's
I recently taught a designation course for an organization. I won't mention the course, or it's a great course, but it was it's so heavy on lecture, and I'm like, I can't teach that way, because what I've found is we're teaching grown-ups generally, and they like to participate. They have so much wisdom and so many experiences to bring to the classroom. I know sometimes instructors worry about losing control or getting that weird off the wall statement or question, but to me, I love what you said there. Get them in, and I don't think I did that like I should have, because this course is so heavy in those first 5 minutes. And when you said that, I thought, boy, that is true. You really, from the beginning, you need to get them involved as quickly as possible, because I found that group not to be too talkative until I kept asking more questions. And
it
which
was harder for you probably to draw them out after they became accustomed to just listening.
right, and so I should have tried to work that in a little bit sooner. And thank you for that reminder, which kind of leads me to um, the next question I was going to ask, and I just forgot, which happens. But oh, sometimes you ask a question, not you, but just the instructor. How do you handle the class that is quiet? I mean, if you ask the question, how long should you wait, or what's a good way to get someone to respond? I have a guilt. I'm too guilty of not waiting long enough. And so I'll just go on and speak. But what's your advice on that?
Uh, that's an exceptional observation, John. And I, like you, that is the heart. I'll even ask a question and then I'll wait a few seconds. And because the silence is
Yes.
deafening, very uncomfortable at times, I'll often respond and say, and the hardest thing for me to do is wait while you formulate a question or while you think about what the answer is supposed to be. I mean, I'll even tell them the hardest thing for me to do is wait. And then I'll make myself wait. And you probably ought to wait at least, I would think at least 10 seconds. And I would say probably 15 or 20, which is an extremely long time. It gets very uncomfortable. But I find if I can be quiet and wait for 15 or 20 seconds, somebody's going to break that silence, because the students, some of them, it makes them uncomfortable. They'll speak. Some of them might just want to give somebody else an opportunity. and then they'll chime in. But we see that a lot on videos. An instructor will ask a question and then the instructor will answer the question. You've got to give the students an opportunity to think about it. And then sometimes you get drug off track. I think you also hit on another really important point. As an instructor, if I give up control and I let my students help lead the class, which is active engagement,
Right.
All of a sudden, I better be the content expert. If I am not solid in the content, if I'm reliant on notes and slides and I have to look up everything, that doesn't mean you have all the answers. I'm just saying if I'm not thoroughly knowledgeable on that topic, it probably is hard to let go and let the students take control because you're too married to your presentation and you're not free to let the students lead the discussion, which brings me back to the question handling, because if you properly handle the questions, if a student asks you a question, you have no idea what the answer is.
Right.
Maybe you don't even understand what the question is. You repeat it back to the student. Okay, well, this is what I heard you ask me. And sometimes I'll just step back, even if I know the answer, but especially if I don't know the answer or I'm not sure, collectively, all those people in that room are a lot smarter than I'll ever be by myself.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a wealth of knowledge in the room, usually with our students. And I'll just step back and say, what do you guys think? Here's John's question. That's a great question, John. What do you guys think?
Right.
And then that starts sometimes a vigorous debate. Sometimes it's just a light conversation. But I've been doing this a long time. So over the years, and my DREI helped with this, I've developed a lot of confidence in my subject matter. And it makes it very easy for me to do that. So for instructors that don't quite have that confidence, I would just encourage you to be over prepared, study and be ready to say, golly, I have no idea. I mean, I occasionally have to say that. I don't know. Wow, that's a great question. Who knows? Let's figure it out.
And that takes me back to my DREI studies where if you don't know, if there's nothing wrong with saying that's a great question and I don't know the answer, but I will find out and report back to you. And I've done that now, and people love that when they're like, wow, he took the time to check on that during break. I had one person ask me a question and I said, I don't know the answer, but I promise you at break, I will call the real estate commission and ask my resource there and find out. And I did, and she gave me the answer and I reported back after break. And it just brought a whole, it was much better than me trying to wing it on there.
Don't fake it. If you don't know, just say so. And on your video, if you're answering and you give incorrect information, that you will lose points for that. You don't lose any points for acknowledging that there's a question you don't have an answer. There are some questions that don't have answers.
Right.
So it's not a bad thing to say, golly, I don't know. And that I like to rely on the students because inevitably I got a couple of them in there Googling something. Now we have to take that with a grain of salt. Google's not always right, but if they're Googling it anyway, so they'll come up, let them help you.
I did, Kim, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, or I would get points taken off, but I'm teaching this course and of course, AI is a big thing today. Everybody's talking about Chat GPT. And so the question was it was a negotiation question, and it had a definition of some sort. So I said, just for fun as a class, let's just go to Chat GPT. And I typed in that, and it gave me a really good explanation for that question. And I said, what about in a real estate negotiation? Well, then it gave an even better definition. I mean, and I knew it was a correct, but I just wanted to have fun with the class using AI. But it was a teaching point because I said, you could actually use AI if you're in a negotiation situation to get some help. And one of the girls in the class raised her hand and she said, I used it last week because she was responding to a counteroffer, and her client, who's very busy and doesn't like long emails, she said, I kept writing my email and I asked ChatGPT to make it condense it down for me. And she said it condensed it down in like 2 sentences, and he loved it, and they got the deal together. So
Wow.
technology and how things change today. So anyway, well, what's your favorite? Yeah, I know your time's valuable, and thank you so much. This has been great. What's your favorite topic, or what do you like to teach the most?
Oh, wow. I I have several topics that I love to teach. I love to teach agency, believe it or not, and I fair housing. I am at heart. I do property management, real
Well, I was
estate
going,
investment, and property management. So if I really had to dig down deep and if I had to pick something, I would say it's property management and investment. And I believe real estate's the best investment you'll make. And I'm passionate about teaching people about how to protect their credit score and how to make good choices so they can afford to invest. And
I do too.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm even
very
a big
good.
fan of owner financing and some things that make some people a little crazy. I love to watch individuals put deals together with other individuals and earn the interest and get the deals done. And that's a very small group of people that are able to do that, but I love
No,
it.
I think that's great. And speaking of property management in Missouri, one of the biggest problems we have is with property management. More violations are in that realm of the license code. So there needs to, it is a challenging, some of the rules and things are different because they will allow people to show property who are on site and different things. So I think there's more need for those types of courses. But I'm with you. I love investment, helping people improve their credit scores. We did a lot of owner financing back in the 80s, so those are all very good. Well, Kim, thank you so much. One last question I will ask for any of those that are watching who maybe they're going through the DREI program, maybe they went through it and didn't get a video approved and need to come back. What words of encouragement would you say to those, or any advice you would have? Even maybe somebody who doesn't even know about the DREI, to any any words about the program itself, or going back through it, or attempting to go through it?
Sure. I would encourage you to go through it and get it done, and go ahead and start videotaping yourself and watching. If you videotape yourself for 3 hours, you don't have to watch the entire 3 hours. Just fast forward through it and watch 15 minutes right in the middle. Then you can delete it. You don't have to show it to anybody else, but videotape yourself. And I will encourage you to pursue your DREI. For me, it it improved. It gave me confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I received a lot of confidence once I achieved it. And maybe that's because when I decided I wanted to do it, I was just getting started. And while I've got enough confidence to stand in front of a room and talk to people, but to have enough confidence to command the room was
Right.
what it did for me. And I do believe that's because I was just a beginning instructor. But for those of you that are new at that, I encourage you to pursue it. And for those of you that are already very confident speakers and you can already command the room, I encourage you to consider paying attention to the GATE principles that you learn in the DREI, because it'll take you from being an exceptional speaker to being incredible. I mean, not just exceptional and not just really good at commanding a room, but working the room and having your students just really engaged.
I think that's so true. And I loved what you said about record the whole 3 hours. That's what I did on my first video. And the first hour, I was like, I was okay. But, by the second, third hour, I thought I was hitting on all cylinders. and that, of course, that was a video that was turned down. So, but record that whole 3 hour session, because sometimes it's hard to really get into to get the students asking the questions and get into the subject matter. And so, yeah, just put the camera back there. And gosh, today I used my iPhone, so I just stuck it in the back of the room, and it was fine. Well, Kim, thank you so much. If you've never had a chance to meet Kim and see her present, you really are missing out on a treat. So I hope you'll get the chance to do that. And if you don't know much about the Real Estate Educators Association, REEA, it is really like one big family. And I'm telling you what, you can tell Kim's a class act, and that's the way everybody is at REEA. You just feel so appreciative and accepted, and in a place where you can learn and share ideas. So Kim, thank you for sharing today. And we appreciate all the support and volunteerism you do for REEA, and for this today. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you for asking me, John Mayfield. It's been a privilege.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.